Friends, good afternoon. We have with us today Chris Kennedy, the Democratic candidate for the governor for the state of Illinois. As you know, Chris Kennedy is from the great JFK Kennedy family and has a legacy of his own, having served as the president of the Greater Food Depository of Chicago and the former chairman of the University of Illinois Board of Trustees, and also the president of the Ionic Merchandise Mart, which has created jobs and brought economic development to the state of Illinois. Let's hear it from Chris Kennedy.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, Chris Kennedy. And we'd like you to tell us what made you run for the state of Illinois' governorship.
You know, I think there's nothing more important than family. And Sheila's one of 5 kids. I'm one of 11. She's got more than 30 first cousins. I've got more than 50. And we have 4 great kids. They're going to make a decision in the next couple of years about whether to remain in Illinois or to move away. Our older friends, they've lost their sons and daughters to other cities and states. We don't want that to happen anymore in Illinois. We want to keep our families together and restore the economy so there'll be jobs and long careers for everybody in the state.
Great. I think you're arrived at the right time, especially with what's going on in Washington, D.C. The citizens of the state of Illinois are all looking forward to an aggressive governor, and you're popularly known as the education governor. Could you explain to our viewers why education is so important in today's context?
I think your viewers know how important education is. And if you look at the great economies in the United States, whether it's Silicon Valley, California, Austin, Texas, Pittsburgh, the area around Carnegie Mellon and Pitt, Research Triangle, North Carolina, Boston, Massachusetts, they're all driven by the same thing, which is the power of higher education. And higher education isn't enough alone. It's necessary but not sufficient. We need to have a great pipeline of highly educated high school and college kids. If we have the most highly educated kids in the United States, we'll have the strongest economy in the world. That's what I believe.
Great. Your grandfather is a historic icon in American history. The Kennedys have been 100 years in the government. And could you tell us some of the great accomplishments, what your uncle, President John F. Kennedy, has done, not only for the immigrant community, but also for the community at large?
Well, President Kennedy, my Uncle Jack, he grew up at a time when his father was the ambassador to England, and his father wanted him to see the world. He came back from those trips and very much a fierce anti-colonialist. He did not believe that having colonies was helpful to providing greater freedom to people around the world, and so he became an anti-colonist, and you could see that in his career in the Congress and the Senate, and ultimately as president. He also believed that, well, the United States was the world's greatest democracy, and how could he improve it? What steps could he take as president to improve it? And I think he realized rightly that we had excluded entire continents, in some sense, from immigrating to the United States. And through a lot of his leadership while he was alive, and then my uncle Ted Kennedy, Senator Teddy Kennedy, and my father Bobby Kennedy in 1965, they changed the immigration laws in the United States, and this country now looks different than it did back then. And we're better off as a result of it, and we hope we'll continue to keep those doors open.
Great. As you all know, that it's because of the late President John F. Kennedy and Chris's own father, who was the Attorney General and then Senator Robert Kennedy, and his uncle Ted Kennedy, that the immigration laws have been so good that we all immigrants are here today from all the continents of the world. Having said that, there's a lot of, with the current presidency, President Trump is talking about putting up walls, he's talking about immigration reforms to restrict entry of immigration. What are your feelings on the chain immigration and the H-1B visas?
I think it's really important to keep families together, and that's been the history of our country. To abandon that system, that viewpoint, is extraordinary to me. I think President Trump knows a little bit about history, as they say, enough to make him dangerous. And he realizes that when a leader of a country is that unpopular, they have 2 choices. They can attack another country and start a war, or they can attack an immigrant or minority population in their own country and start a war against them. I think in some ways Donald Trump is going down a two-track path where he's looking at starting a war, perhaps in North Korea, and then he's attacking immigrants in the United States. And I think that's a major departure from the history of the United States and the very specific history that made us a better country, and that is to allow in, to reunify families and to allow in the best and the brightest from around the world.
You hit the nail on the head, Chris. What about we are talking about immigration now, and Chicago and Illinois state has been a sanctuary city and a sanctuary state. Donald Trump has asked Governor Rauner and others to review the sanctuary state and city. How important it is. It's very important for the immigrant community in Chicago and in the greater state of Illinois to retain the sanctuary status. How would you react to it? What is your stand on that?
I think we need to oppose Donald Trump with everything that we've got. I think we need to make implementing anything he wants implemented harder and just simply outlast the guy. That's what I think we need to do. He may be indicted, he may be impeached, he's definitely not going to get reelected. So we only have 3 more years, and we can delay, I think, with him. Having said that, I think we need to start making arguments again about why immigration is important to our economy, important to our future as a country, and important to the very values that we hold that make us different than any country in the world. We believe in the United States in the notion of freedom, that this is the land of the free with unlimited economic mobility. In our country, the thing that makes us different is freedom. We celebrate on the 4th of July Independence Day. Independence is equivalent to freedom. That's our national value. We are the land of the free. I think we want to create more and more freedom for everybody who lives here. And education is the key to freedom in America or anywhere around in America or anywhere around the world. And if we do not provide great education, we rob people of their freedom. And that's an un-American thing to do.
Very well said, Chris. You talked about education, the need for education. You talked about America as the freedom land, where welcome the immigrants, and also the land of opportunity. What today in the world, and especially in Chicago and Illinois, the economic development, what is your vision for a strong, rich, economic, prosperous Chicago and the state of Illinois?
That's really the most important question, because we're living in a state where the economy is shrinking. We have declining taxable assets and the need for rising taxes. Now, I'm not an economist, but I can tell you that sounds like the economic equivalent of circling the drain. It doesn't have to be like this. We can change the way we fund our government. Bruce Rauner took a very narrow, very small government budget problem, and he's turned it into, well, statewide economic crisis. It doesn't have to be like that. The government, it can fund itself. It needs to tax the economy differently. We need a progressive income tax, and we need to provide property tax relief for people who, well, sometimes lose their houses because their property taxes are too high. That needs to come to an end, and quickly. If we do that, then we can educate our young people. Each of them can become mini economic engines. They can help drive economic development across our state. Higher education is very important, and we need to continue to bring into the country people who value the notion of education in America, that want an advanced degree, finish college, go on and maybe get a master's or a PhD, because they help create the new knowledge that starts new companies, that employ people, who pay local taxes, and educate a whole new generation ready to begin that great process again and again.
Great. I think that's what the viewers and the citizens would like to hear, that you are interested in building a strong Illinois, a prosperous Illinois, which creates jobs for all community members, and also invite industries to come back to Chicago and Illinois, and also have foreign investment and make it a shining Illinois under your leadership. Having talked about education, immigration, economics, now, you know, Chicago is the #1 crime city in the United States, and it happens to be a very big part of the state of Illinois. What is your plans to curb crime in Illinois, and also about gun violence, increasing gun violence going around today?
My belief is that education is the most important thing that we can provide the next generation. And that if we have a really good school, people will want to live around it. A really good school drives property values. It cures every problem we have, unless there's violence. And if there's violence, no one's going to move next to that school, no matter how good it is. We need to confront the violence program. We need to confront the wave of violence that's destroying our city. Our campaign, we've introduced an 8-point plan about how to intervene. And the solutions are sort of obvious. There are things that we can do and do quickly, but Governor Rauner has done nothing to improve the lives of people in the city. He's disinvested, taken money away from the very programs that allow us to intervene before the violence begins. He's cut funding for programs that help us intervene after the violence starts to stop it from spreading. We've closed half the mental health facilities in the city of Chicago. We've threatened the safety net hospital system. And as a result, there are people who are hurting, and hurt people hurt people.
Absolutely right. Talking about mental health system, which has been slashed with the Rauner budget, and mental health, I think, is one of your top priorities in your campaign agenda. What do you think of the Obama healthcare system, which is trying to be exited out by President Trump, and the existing healthcare system in the state of Illinois?
I think hundreds of thousands of people received insurance under Obamacare in our state, and our governor, our congressional delegation should have done more to preserve Obamacare. Nobody in America should have to worry that they're one sickness away from bankruptcy. That's the system that Donald Trump advocates for, and it doesn't have to be like that in the United States, and certainly not in Illinois. In Illinois, I think we can move to a single-payer solution. I think we can do that by overcoming the resistance of the insurance companies. I think the only people more powerful than the insurance companies in the state of Illinois are the large employers. And for a large employer, the healthcare cost is one of the driving elements of higher costs overall. Let's bring those employers together, allow them to work together without saying it's collusion. And they'll work together to drive down the cost of prescription drugs, drive down the cost of procedures, and allow us all then to have health care in Illinois.
That's great that you are willing to have a dialogue with the captains of the industry and the healthcare giants to come to bring down healthcare costs and make healthcare more accessible to all the community members of the Chicagoland and greater state of Illinois. You know, representing minorities and talking about minorities, especially the African American community, they are always very concerned about the recent police profiling. What can you, if elected as governor of the state of Illinois, what would be your agenda to set that straight?
I think the governor can play a great role in reducing violence in Chicago, and I think the state government can do a lot to, well, rebuild the trust that people have in their government, whether it's the government of Illinois, the government of Chicago, or the governing leadership of the Chicago Police Department. New York City just celebrated the lowest homicide rate since 1959.
Wow.
They credit many things, but foremost among them would be community policing. Well, community policing was invented in Chicago. It was perfected here, and then it was adopted by places like Los Angeles and New York, which today, if you combine the murder rates, we have a higher murder rate than New York and LA combined. So what happened? Well, we abandoned community policing. We got rid of a lot of training. We attacked the police department, and many of the senior officers retired. So there's no mentorship anymore. And we've underfunded our schools, making it difficult to recruit community police officers from the very communities that need police officers the most from their community. That doesn't have to be like that in our city or in our state. People don't trust their government, and they don't trust their state government because so many of our governors have gone to jail. They don't trust our legislature because they know that the legislature is making money as property tax lawyers and destroying their lives and underfunding our schools, and they don't trust a government that, well, doesn't provide safety in their communities. So we need to reestablish that trust. And I think by having me as governor, someone who spends his life in the communities where crime is at its highest because of my anti-hunger work, I think I can reach out to people, meet them where they are, and establish a community amongst us to allow them to become allies with the police once again.
Awesome. I think you said it so well, and the message is going out to the people. When we were along the campaign trail and interviewing other candidates, we're meeting different community members. They all said, "I'm going to vote for Chris Kennedy because he wants to root out corruption. That's his number one agenda." And it's so nice to see during these 100 years of the Kennedys being in government that your candidacy for the governor of the state of Illinois has become like a renaissance for the yesteryear politicians of the Kennedys, where they talked about trust, honesty, integrity in government, which has not been seen in the last several decades in the state of Illinois. So, and recently to have your nephew, Representative Joe Kennedy from Boston, who was chosen to rebut President Trump's speech, was very, very poignant, was the right time, not only for our campaign, but right time throughout the country. Your views and thoughts on that?
I thought Joe did a terrific job. Well, particularly in contrast with President Trump. There was, of course, the fact that he's younger and from another generation. There's the fact that he's charming in a way that Donald Trump never will be, and the manner in which he spoke, which was from the heart and not from some speech that somebody else wrote for him. Joe's view of our country was a warm view, a view of helping others, of living the life that, well, I think my father, Bobby Kennedy, thought of as politics as an honorable profession. And I think it was inspiring to watch him, not just for me, but for a whole new generation.
Absolutely.
The largest generation in the United States history is the millennials. And I think if they're looking for a hero, they can find it in Joe Kennedy.
Great. Talking about the millennials, the interfaith leadership which you're espousing and getting all the faith leaders under your banner, especially at this point of time in history, the Muslim community in the United States, and especially in Greater Illinois, somehow feel threatened under the current national regime. And I've seen that you're going out to the mosque and your campaign people are out there to tell them that you're one with them and to not be afraid. What's your message to them?
Well, my message is that we'll stand shoulder to shoulder, side by side, arm in arm, just like we always have in the United States. I think about my own grandmother, Rose Fitzgerald Kennedy. She was the mother of President John F. Kennedy, but before that she was the daughter of the first American-born Irish Catholic mayor of the city of Boston. And she took us aside when we were young, each of us, and said, "You're growing up with privilege, but don't you ever let the government, don't you ever let businesses treat new immigrants to the United States the way we were treated, as dirty, as unintelligent, as uneducatable, as a threat to society and a threat to the safety of our country." That's how the Irish Catholics were treated when they first arrived in the United States. And she made it clear that we couldn't treat other people like that, that we need to remember our history and see the notion that we celebrate the parable of our country is the pilgrims arriving here and being welcomed by the native people. Our hero in Illinois is Jane Addams, who helped settle people in our community. That's what we want to celebrate. And if we do, we'll get back to the very core belief of freedom that we need to make part of everybody's lives in our country.
Great. You heard Chris Kennedy. He hails from an immigrant family. And we'd like to give your closing thoughts on your campaign and your vision for the state of Illinois.
I think it's important to look back in history at a time like this when, well, we have uncertainty in Washington and a lot of uncertainty here in Illinois. What do? Well, we all come from different places, but we're all taught the same history, I think. Learn the lessons of the founding fathers who gave our country a motto, not not just for that year, that decade, but a slogan for the country's future. And they said, out of many, one. And then we're taught to, well, worship Abraham Lincoln, because Lincoln gives his life to a cause he thinks is more important than any other, which was to hold the Union together and thereby give everyone greater freedom. And then we're taught to admire Franklin Roosevelt. He's one of the wealthiest men of his country, and he says in the 1940s, look, we all go up or we all go down, but we're going together. At this time in American history, we need to remember that greater communal purpose that the founding fathers had for all of us. We need to be reminded of the story of Abraham Lincoln's life, because he gave his life in a way that proves that our lives are not the most important lives in the life of our country. And we need to remember, as Franklin Roosevelt's example shows us, that no matter how well we do in life, whatever our connections are, how powerful we become, we can still stand on the right side of history, just like he did. And if we do those things, if we keep the promise of this country, we can give our kids good jobs, we can give them long careers, we can keep them close to home, and we can, I think, at least in Illinois, once again make the American dream the dream for all Americans.
Thank you so much. Friends, you just heard the dynamic candidate for state of Illinois, Governor Chris Kennedy. He comes from the great Kennedy clan, and he also has a vision, like you just heard, on different fronts, on education, on economic front, on the healthcare, and on immigration, and on making everyone be part of this American dream which the Kennedys lived. And here is an opportunity for all of you to go out and vote for Chris Kennedy for governor on the primary on March 20th. And you know, this election is a crucial election. It's labeled as one of the costliest gubernatorial races in the country, with Bruce Rauner pumped in $91 billion, Pritzker, a challenger to Chris Kennedy in the Democratic primary, pumped in $40 million. But what we are looking for is your support, your vote, spreading your word for Chris Kennedy. We know that with God's help and with each of your support and grassroots level, we can overcome this, and we shall emerge as victorious on March 20th. And you know, with manpower, there have been several examples, the Obama campaign, and Chris Kennedy has been endorsed by Congressman Danny K. Davis and Congressman Bobby Rush. And we appeal to you all to vote for Chris Kennedy to root out corruption. Thank you so much.